You're tuning into the deep dive because you're serious about speaking English fluently and with real confidence.
Fantastic goal.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's precisely what we're going to explore together today. Think of this not as, another lesson, but more like your personalized strategy session. We've gathered insights that, well, they go beyond just the usual grammar drills and vocabulary lists. We're aiming to pull out the core methods for really unlocking your speaking potential.
And what's really striking, looking across the different resources, is this consistent emphasis on mindset.
Right, mindset and, crucially, regular practice.
Yeah, consistent practice.
Yeah.
And I think it's important right from the start to have a realistic picture of what we actually mean by fluency.
Good point.
The material we've looked at, it suggests fluency isn't some unattainable peak of perfect pronunciation and, endless vocabulary. It's much more about the ability to communicate smoothly, clearly.
It's about the momentum, isn't it? Keeping the conversation going.
Exactly. The capacity to express your thoughts without those really long pauses. That's what seems to define it, more than, say, perfect grammar in every single sentence.
Yeah, and it's so common for learners, as our sources point out, to hit this confidence gap.
Oh, definitely.
You've put in the hours, you understand a lot, but then the moment comes to actually speak and poof, that self-doubt just creeps in. So what we're diving into today are the practical, actionable steps you can take to really start bridging that gap.
Okay, so let's really unpack this idea of fluency then. What does it actually mean?
Yeah.
The information we're working with, it makes it pretty clear that it's not about talking super fast.
No.
And certainly not about some idealized perfect English.
Right.
What's fascinating is the repeated focus on just keeping a conversation moving.
Just keeping it going.
Yeah, articulating your ideas without those big awkward silences. And using the vocabulary you already have, but, flexibly.
Using what you've got.
And understanding, of course, and responding naturally to whoever you're talking to.
That concept of flow really resonates. It's like, when you're chatting in your first language, you're not analyzing every word.
No, it just comes out.
It just flows. And the resources, they really challenge this whole idea that fluency means breakneck speed or absolutely zero mistakes.
It's much more about that continuous movement, isn't it? That forward motion in the conversation.
It really is. And if we think about the bigger picture here, it's probably worth remembering that even native English speakers aren't perfect.
Oh, absolutely not. We don't reach some mythical state of constant perfection. We stumble over words.
We make grammar mistakes.
All the time. We use filler words while we're thinking. The real point here is effective communication.
Connecting with people.
Exactly. Being understandable. And, just as important, making the interaction, enjoyable.
Okay, now let's dig into something our sources consistently flag as just absolutely vital. Confidence, yeah. They actually make a pretty compelling case that it might play an even bigger role than perfect grammar when it comes down to actual real-world communication.
Which might sound a bit backward at first.
It might.
Yeah.
But when you think about it...
Well, yeah, let's consider this sort of thought experiment. Imagine two groups of English learners.
Okay.
Group one. Almost perfect grammar, huge vocabulary. But they're terrified of making a mistake.
Yeah.
So they hardly ever speak.
Right. Frozen by fear.
Pretty much. Group two. Their English is more basic, okay? But they're confident. They're willing to jump in, try things out. They don't let the fear of mistakes stop them.
Okay.
Now, which of those groups do you think actually communicates more effectively and learns faster in the long run?
Well, it has to be the second group, doesn't it?
It seems pretty clear.
The ones who are actually speaking are getting the practice, the feedback.
They're learning from the interaction itself, even if it's not grammatically flawless.
And our sources really drive this home. Confidence isn't something you need before you speak.
No, it's a result of speaking.
It grows through action.
Exactly. It builds up with every small step, every little success you have.
So what's interesting then is the sort of positive feedback loop.
Yeah, describe that.
Well, you start speaking, maybe just a short exchange. You manage it successfully, perhaps ordering food, like you said, or asking directions.
Small wins.
Tiny wins. But acknowledging them, seeing them as successes, that fuels your confidence.
Which then makes you more likely to speak again.
Exactly. It reinforces itself. And the material consistently pushes this idea at view mistakes not as failures,
But as learning opportunities.
Yeah.
Essential feedback.
Absolutely. And just keep practicing, even when you feel nervous.
Keep pushing through that discomfort.
Okay, let's pivot a bit now to the mechanics of language learning. Our sources talk quite a bit about balancing input and output.
Right.
Can you break those down for us? What do they mean here?
Sure. So input is basically all the English you're taking in.
Listening, reading.
Yeah, listening to podcasts like this one, watching movies, TV shows, reading articles, books, it's absorption.
Got it. And output.
Output is the flip side. It's your active production of the language.
Speaking and writing.
Exactly. Speaking and writing. Now, a really common pattern for learners is to focus heavily, maybe too heavily, on input.
Right. Lots of listening, lots of reading.
Loads of time spent consuming the language, but maybe not enough time actually using it, especially speaking.
That makes sense. It probably feels, I don't know, safer, more comfortable just taking things in.
It often does.
Yeah.
But the sources, they make a pretty strong case against this imbalance.
What do they suggest?
Well, there's a kind of guideline that emerges. Maybe call it a golden rule.
Okay.
For every hour you spend on input, listening, reading, watching, you should probably aim for about 30 minutes of output.
Half an hour of output for every hour of input.
Roughly. Yeah, with a real emphasis on speaking within that output time. It just highlights how active you need to be.
Can't just soak it up passively.
No, you've got to actively engage, produce the language. And a key takeaway across the board is making sure you speak every day, somehow.
Even in small ways.
Even in very simple ways. Just get used to producing English daily.
Okay, now this is probably where a lot of listeners think, great idea, but I don't have anyone to practice with.
The classic challenge. Very common.
So what practical strategies do the resources offer for getting that vital speaking practice in, even if you're flying solo?
Yeah, this is a huge point, and thankfully the resources offer several really concrete techniques you can do totally on your own.
Good. Like what?
Well, one really effective method is called shadowing.
Shadowing.
Yeah. It's where you listen to a native speaker, maybe a short audio clip or part of a podcast, and you immediately repeat what they say.
Right after them.
Instantly. You try to mimic their speed, their intonation, the rhythm as closely as you can.
Huh. So it's like you're their echo.
Exactly. Almost like singing along, but with spoken words.
Yeah.
It really gets your mouth moving and tunes your ear.
That sounds really useful for catching the sort of music of the language. What else can you do alone?
Another one, which might feel a bit weird at first, but is super helpful, is self-talk.
Talking to yourself.
Pretty much. Just narrate your everyday activities in English, out loud, or even just in your head to start.
Give me an example.
Okay, so you're making breakfast. You could say, right, I'm getting the eggs from the fridge. Now I'm going to crack them into the bowl. Where's the whisk?
Huh. Okay, I see.
It's a low-pressure way to practice forming sentences using everyday words, just thinking in English.
Yeah, I can see how that would build comfort, just forming thoughts on the fly. What about checking your progress? Like, how do you know if you're improving?
Good question. The sources also suggest using voice recording.
Recording yourself speaking?
Yep. Just take your phone, record yourself talking for maybe a minute or two about anything that you did yesterday, your opinion on a movie, whatever.
And then?
Then you listen back.
Yeah.
Critically, but kindly.
Okay. What am I listening for?
You listen for fluency. Where did you pause a lot? Did parts sound smooth?
Yeah.
Were there words you struggled with? It gives you that objective view of your own speech.
That sounds a bit scary, but really useful for spotting weaknesses.
It can be confronting initially, but it's such a powerful tool for self-correction.
And for people who do want to connect with others, any suggestions there?
Yeah, for finding actual speaking partners, the resources mention quite a few online platforms and apps. Things like Tandem, HelloTalk, Speaky. You've probably heard of some.
Language exchange apps.
Exactly. They connect you with people Learning your native language, who are native speakers of English, so you teach each other.
The swap.
A swap, exactly. It creates that mutual benefit and gives you real conversational practice.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there maybe one more solo technique worth mentioning?
Yes, definitely. Imitation practice. It's a bit like shadowing, but maybe more focused.
How does it work?
You take short clips from movies or maybe YouTube videos, watch a specific line or a short exchange a few times, really listen. Then, try to say it exactly like the actor or speaker.
Focusing on the accent and rhythm.
Precisely. Pronunciation, intonation, the flow. It's
Okay.
brilliant for refining your accent and just sounding more natural.
Lots of options there then, even without a partner.
Absolutely. The big takeaway is you don't always need a native speaker right there. Consistency with these solo practices. That's key.
Right. Okay, let's shift gears slightly to vocabulary building. This is another area where learners can feel, well, pretty overwhelmed.
Understandably, there are so many words.
And the common approach is trying to memorize long lists, right? Is that effective?
Well, according to the resources we looked at, not really. They strongly advise against just rote memorization of isolated words.
So what's the alternative?
Learning vocabulary in context.
Meaning?
Meaning, instead of just learning delicious means tastes very good, you learn the whole phrase where you found it, like, this soup is delicious.
Ah, so you learn the word and how it's used.
Exactly. You see it in a natural sentence, you understand its function better, and it sticks more easily.
That makes intuitive sense. What else helps build vocabulary effectively?
The sources really emphasize learning collocations.
Collocations. Remind us what those are.
They're just words that naturally tend to go together in English. Like we say, make a decision, not usually do a decision.
Right. Even though do isn't grammatically wrong there, make just sounds right.
It's the natural pairing. Or take a break, not make a break in that sense. Learning these common combinations makes your English sound much more fluid, much more native-like.
So learn chunks of language, not just single words.
Precisely. Think in phrases.
How can listeners actually do this? How do you collect and practice these?
Well, the suggestions include keeping a dedicated notebook, maybe, or using a flashcard app. Anki is often mentioned.
For collecting the phrases and collocations.
Yes, not just single words. But here's the critical part. You can't just collect them. You have to actively review them.
Say them out loud.
Say them out loud, definitely. And then make a conscious effort to actually use them when you speak or write. Try to weave them into your own sentences.
Active recall and usage.
That's the key. Passive recognition isn't enough for fluency.
Okay, and for someone just starting out, feeling like vocabulary is this massive mountain to climb, any shortcuts or starting points?
Well, not exactly shortcuts, but there's a very helpful insight the resources share.
Oh, yeah.
It turns out the 1,000 most common words in English actually cover a huge chunk, something like 80% of everyday conversation.
Wow, 80% just from the top 1,000.
Roughly, yes.
Okay.
So focusing your initial efforts on really mastering those high-frequency words gives you a massive leg up in both understanding and speaking.
That makes it seem much more manageable. Focus on the core first.
Get the foundation solid.
Okay. So we've talked about confidence, input-output balance, solo practice, smart vocabulary. Let's step back now. What's the big overarching principle that ties this all together for long-term progress?
If there's one central theme that echoes through all the material, it's the absolute necessity of consistent repetition.
Repetition, repetition, repetition.
Absolutely. Fluency isn't built by learning something once and then moving on, never looking back.
No.
It requires repeated exposure, repeated practice, until using that language feature, that word, that phrase, that structure becomes almost automatic, effortless.
There was a good analogy used in the sources for this, wasn't there?
Yes, the analogy of watering a plant. I like that one.
Explain it.
Well, if you water a plant just once, thoroughly, but then ignore it,
It's going to wither.
right. But if you get a little water consistently, day after day,
It grows strong.
it flourishes. Language learning is exactly the same. Small, regular, consistent efforts add up over time to create really significant, lasting results.
So consistency trumps intensity, maybe?
Often, yes. A little bit every day is usually far more effective than one massive study session once a week.
Okay, so based on that principle of consistency, what might a practical weekly routine look like? Do the sources suggest a framework?
They do offer a kind of simple sample structure, just as a starting point, of course.
Like what?
Maybe Monday to Friday. Aim for that 30 minutes of listening practice, plus 30 minutes of focused speaking practice, using those techniques we discussed.
An hour a day during the week? Okay.
Then maybe on Saturday, you could focus more on enjoying English media. Watch a movie, binge a series, but with an active ear. Note down useful phrases you hear.
Make input a bit more relaxed, but still active.
Exactly. And then Sunday. Maybe take just 5-10 minutes to record yourself reflecting on your week. What did you learn? What challenges did you face? And review your notes or flashcards.
A sort of weekly review and reflection.
Yeah. The core message really is, even if it's just around 1 hour total each day, if you do it consistently, the improvement in your fluency over time can be really quite remarkable.
It's about building that habit.
Building the habit, sticking with it. That's the engine of progress.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. For our listeners who are really committed to this goal, speaking English fluently, confidently, what are the absolute key takeaway?
I mean, let's summarize. I'd say, first, remember fluency is about flow, smooth communication, not some impossible ideal of perfection.
Ditch perfectionism.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Second, confidence is crucial, maybe even more than grammar sometimes, and it's built by speaking. Take action.
Action builds confidence. Got it.
Third, you've got to balance your input, listening, reading, with your output, especially speaking. Don't just consume produce.
Input needs output.
Fourth, there are plenty of effective ways to practice speaking, even when you're alone. Shadowing, self-talk, recording yourself, imitation. Use them.
Solo practice works.
Fifth, build vocabulary smartly. Learn phrases in context, learn collocations, focus on high-frequency words first. Don't just memorize lists.
Context and chumps over lists.
And finally, and maybe most importantly, consistency and repetition are everything. It's the daily effort that builds lasting fluency.
Water the plant every day.
Water the plant every day. That's the mantra.
That's a fantastic summary. Breaking it down like that really makes it feel, achievable, not so daunting.
Hope so. It's a journey, but a doable one.
Absolutely. So, as you, our listener, go about your day today, maybe just consider this. What's one small English phrase you could practice saying out loud right now?
Just one.
Or maybe what's one simple daily activity, making tea, washing dishes, walking to work, that you could start narrating to yourself in English, even just for 60 seconds?
Start small.
Exactly. Remember, even those seemingly tiny, consistent actions are what pave the road to speaking English fluently and, yes, confidently.